Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Uh, Thank you for your participation on this lecture. And at this moment, I would like to explain about regionalism and foreign policy. This is part of the element that is very significant, influencing foreign policy decision making. Okay, this is basically similar with the previous aspect that uh, external factors in foreign policy decision making determined by some factors, and one of them is regionalism. And I think if you look at the another lecture, especially in Southeast Asian international relations, regionalism is always referred to the existence of ASEAN organization. So, ASEAN organization is very significant, influencing Indonesian foreign policy in other ASEAN countries. All right. Uh, let me see at this concept that foreign policy is basically uh, consists of uh, struggle of the countries strive to struggle on national interests. So safeguarding national interest is very important to the country. So if you want to formulate foreign policy, means you strive to achieve national goal, national interests in international uh, forum or milieu. Okay, I just remembering you that a good foreign policy theory should uh, ask the primary question: what the effect of international system on national behavior? And this is very realist perspective. And the position of regionalism is very important since the countries like Indonesia is joining this organization. So of course, country like let's say like Saudi Arabia, North African countries, North American countries, also influencing by specific organization there. Even the organization sometimes did not work properly, but this is very significant, at least in some aspect. Okay, the regionalism is basically influencing foreign policy because the existence of organization bringing some influence, such as norms, regulations, international regulations, regional values that should be complied by the state. That's why regionalism is sometimes a very influence to the state behaviors. This is Charles Henman said. Okay, this is the basic concept that I always mention in every lecture. So if we are talking about regionalism, this is always rely on specific organization. Uh, for instance, ASEAN, EU, African Union, Arab League, and etc. And according to Ethel Solingen, Regionalism is the exchange of maybe individual, organization, media, goods, uh, monetary transaction, including politics, ideology, military in specific region. But for Dewi Fortune Anwar, this is Indonesian scholars, which is previously became President Habibie advisors on foreign policy, defining that foreign regionalism is the exchange of the countries, but for specific purpose, like for regional security, regional economy, regional peace, because of course uh, Jai Fortuna views is very influenced by his position in the government. So everything should be referred to the state-based perspective. Okay, according to Sergio Santos, regionalism exists to push regional integration among neighboring countries, even all over the world. But this is almost impossible. But regionalism is always pushing regional countries to integrate each other to achieve a specific purpose. So that's why Santos divided two specific definition on regionalism. One is regionalism itself, and two is regionalization. So regionalism is a project, and regionalization is a process. You can divide, you can differentiate this concept that regionalism is, of course, this is a very political terms, but regionalization is sometimes neutral, because the process of regionalization is involve many actors, and not only talking about politics, even sports, trades, and extra. Okay, based on that definitions, one of the important things that regionalism have is always talking about cooperation. This is very influenced by liberalism perspective, that countries should have positive views on politics, and because of the positive views on other state, the main component of region liberalism is cooperation, especially on economy. And also regionalism involve not only state-based actors but also non-state actors. This is a very liberal perspective. Uh, Liberalism believe that regional organization that focusing on especially on economic cooperation is very important in the region, like ASEAN. This is merited ways. Even in the practice way, that regional organization sometimes not only talking about economy, but of course in politics, like ASEAN is that previously dominated by political business. And I think because of the end of the Cold War, ASEAN countries began to think about economy, and the economy of ASEAN organization is very influenced by external actors like the US, China, Korea, Japan, and etc. Okay, this is a regionalism based on liberalism perspective. Is very realist influence because the role of state is very still very significant, and even in the in the context of ASEAN achievement since the establishment in 1967, the peace situation is ASEAN, it should be recognized. But I think current situation is different, quite different, because since the end of the Cold War, uh, ASEAN began to think more moderate, not only talking about politics and but also talking about economy, and ideological contestation in the region is should finally dismissed because of the economic perspective, and that's why countries like former communist countries like Indochina countries finally joining ASEAN, and this is the indication that ASEAN is not only talking about politics but in the wider perspective. Okay, if we look at the early development of ASEAN regionalism, this kind of organization is established because to counter communist influence, especially in Indochina, and the primary goals of ASEAN is of course in political business, and this is changing drastically after end of the Cold War. Okay, of course, if we compare it with European Union, ASEAN cooperation or ASEAN regionalism is not uh, tough as European Union because of the background, historical background of the organization. If we're talking about EU, there are many sub substructure in this organization like court, parliament, and other agencies that can charge the countries if they violence against EU law, and this is very different with ASEAN organization. And one of the regionalism context in ASEAN, the most influence aspect influencing foreign policy decision making is called as ASEAN Way. This is local values, local wisdom that beliefs by ASEAN countries, non-interference, consultation, non-coercion argumentation, and backdoor non-formal diplomacy. This is part of specific or the uniqueness of ASEAN Way. But sometimes this is quite complicated when we facing issues like Rohingya in Myanmar and other human rights abuses involving ASEAN countries. ASEAN could not intervene or sometimes could not do anything to resolve the problems. This is quite complicated. But this is because of the ASEAN Way, the regional peace building is very significant. Okay, the ASEAN Way consists of some key component. This is one is personal approach among ASEAN leaders, a similar culture, respect each other, and also the founders of ASEAN is very close each other. This is very influenced in the later on political development in ASEAN because of the historical background. Okay, but based on Rizal Sukma definition, the ASEAN way is one of the key component to to influence ASEAN countries because of the norms of non-interference, respect each other, consensus, oppose the threats, external threats, and also the use of what we call is comprehensive security, not only military but also economy, welfare, justice, human rights, and other security issues, not only state-based security like realist views, but also uh, ASEAN way is also part of comprehensive security. But the interesting is ASEAN, even this is a regional and multilateral organization, but most of the members thinking multilaterally but acting bilaterally. This is quite interesting because the norms of ASEAN non-interference means the country should not intervene other countries. So, and ASEAN itself did not have any specific agency that could with the sentencing the members like EU because of this kind of situation, thinking multilaterally, acting bilaterally. In the case of Malaysia-Singapore relations, Indonesia-Malaysia relations, Malaysia-Filipino relations, all are resolved by bilateral agreement. Okay, so the regionalism is very significant because uh, consists of some regional norms, and sometimes maybe Indonesia in the previous history, like during Suharto, ASEAN become uh, milestone of Indonesian foreign policy, and in Malaysia also, for example, also referring the ASEAN value during foreign policy decision making. For instance, like one of the norms of regionalism is non-interference. So Malaysian foreign policy always uh, guided by non-interference norms, and this norms is part of regionalism norms under the umbrella of ASEAN Wing. And this is the easy sample. So if we talking about regionalism, the easy way to understand is how the impact of regional organization. So how the regional organization impact on countries' foreign policy, and this is uh, the key point. So please read another resources that are very rich in the internet. Just downloading in the Google about how the regionalism impact on foreign policy. Okay, thank you so much. I think this is that's all my presentation. So please add more your reading on regionalism so you can more understand on how regionalism impact on foreign policy decision making. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.